Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Science Shorts with Mr. Perkins. I'm Mr. Perkins. I'm a former biology teacher. I've worked with the National Park Service. I've worked with the Audubon Society, and I'm just trying to put together something to help parents and teachers right now who have a lot of work to do thanks to COVID. So my hope is that I can be some small part of making people's lives easier. And with that, we start with, where are we going? There we go. Okay, cool. We start with our birthdays. I've been doing a lot of ancient birthdays or older birthdays, and I always want it to be important for my students to remember that science is still happening. There's a lot of new discoveries being made. There's so much with science, and that science is not just people in white lab coats. And so on this date, 4 years ago, was when SpaceX successfully landed the Falcon 9 rocket. This was important because this was a rocket that had gone up to space, delivered a part of the International Space Station, come back, and landed safely. And being able to reuse that piece, huge cost-saving measure, and also a pretty amazing thing to be able to land that without it breaking up as a unmanned chunk. So great job on SpaceX. It's an incredible feat of physics and engineering, and it happened 4 years ago. So today, I talked about, on Monday, we talked about what a virus is. And today, we're going to talk about what our immune system is. Our immune system is an incredibly sophisticated defense mechanism. It is just incredible with what it is able to do. And there are, there are whole books and whole courses on just small parts of the immune system. I'm going to focus pretty narrowly. We're going to talk about antibodies over here. We're going to talk about T cells down here. We're talking about, along with natural killer cells a little bit as well. Now, oftentimes, when we think of the immune system, you'll ask, what is our immune system? And people will frequently say white blood cells. And white blood cells aren't actually a thing that exists. White blood cell is a really broad category. White blood cell includes natural killer cells, it includes neutrophils, it includes monocytes, it includes T regulatory cells. So white blood cells is kind of a catch-all term. But as you can see here, the immune system is a broad category of things. It is an incredible system in our body. But again, we're gonna focus on antibodies, and we're gonna focus on those T regulatory cells today, and that's in adaptive immunity, because honestly, about 90% of what your body is able to fight off, it fights off due to innate immunity. And I'm kind of going to ignore that today. I'm going to focus on adaptive immunity, because adaptive immunity is how, when our body sees something new, it's able to fight it off for the first time and then learn how to fight it off better. In other words, if there's a new strain of coronavirus, and our body sees that for the very first time, how does that deal with it? That's adaptive immunity. So even though innate immunity is actually a much bigger part of the immune system, we're going to focus very narrowly on adaptive today. And these are the heroes of adaptive immune responses. Antibodies. You may have heard the term before. They look like little Ys. Sometimes they're pictured as Ts, but these antibodies are the stars of your adaptive immune system. And the three pieces of it that you need to see, this part here and this part here, so effectively the two forks of the Y have kind of the same thing, but they're flipped, it's mirrored. This one is a mirror of this one. And so these branches of the Y, these branches of the antibody, bond with what's called an antigen. And an antigen is a catch-all name for anything that your body doesn't want to be there. So an antigen could be a bacteria, it could be a virus, it could be a parasite. If you get a splinter in your finger, your immune system is going to attack that wood, and in that case, that wood and the splinter is going to be an antigen. So an antigen is a real broad catch-all term. But so you've got these two spots that can attach to antigens, and then here, the base of the Y is used for other things in your immune system. We're going to talk about that. And these antibodies, the branches of this Y, these ends are hugely variable. So if we look over here, this antigen bonding site, this will hook up to this antigen, but it wouldn't to some of these others. But your body is capable of making 10 trillion different shaped endings for these. 10 trillion shaped endings. Your body is capable of, and what happens is your body just kind of rolls the dice and makes a bunch of different random combinations every moment. You're doing it right now as you're sitting there. And your body just keeps making these random combinations, and these antibodies then float throughout your body and throughout your bloodstream. And if it hooks up to any of these antigens, if this bonding site is ever able to bond with something, then a whole chain reaction happens, which is what we're going to get to next. But again, I need to emphasize, your body can make trillions of different types of antibodies. And even a single antibody, it can make trillions of that individual antibody. So your body is ready and casts this very broad net for new things. So these pieces of the Y are what attach to the antigen, and they're all different shapes. So what happens? So our antibody finds a shape and connects. So these white dots here are our antibodies, and these kind of green pluses are what we don't want in our body. So we talked last time about the virus is able to get into our cell via a secret handshake. It has those proteins on the outside of the cell. Well, our antibodies look for that secret handshake. And once the antibody finds something that it can connect to, if it's a virus, if it's that special shape the antibody is looking for, once that antibody connects and does that secret handshake, the antibody does not let go. It stays stuck to that antigen. Again, whether that's a virus or a bacteria or whatever, that antibody will stay stuck, and it's a giant flag. And the rest of your immune system, what we kind of think of as white blood cells, will see that antibody sticking out as the giant flag, and that antibody says, come deal with me. This is a problem. And so if we go back, I told you the kind of the base of the Y, the rest of the immune system looks for this. So if our antibody connects to something and sticks to it like glue, then the rest of the immune system comes along and does two very important things. Here we have what's called a B cell, or a lymphocyte. If you've ever heard of your lymph nodes, that's where these largely exist. So these B cells will see an antibody stuck to something, and they will come and connect to that base of the antibody and learn that special antibody pattern. So learn the secret handshake that caused this antibody to stick. And then that B cell will just start producing millions of those exact antibodies. So they can go out and do the same secret handshake to stick to all of the other things. So this B cell learns. This B cell is capable of identifying what the flag is and then making more and more and more to protect things. And then additionally, we've got, again, what we think of as kind of white blood cells, the things that come along and eat the bacteria. Well, if these white blood cells just had free reign throughout our body, they could destroy any old cell. And that occasionally happens. When we think of autoimmune disorders, that's what occurs, is our immune system isn't functioning right. But when working properly, these white blood cells, again, T cells or natural killer cells, there are several types of these, but they see an antibody stuck to something, and that's a big flag to the white blood cell that says, this needs to be destroyed. So we've got two big responses here. Our antibody does the secret handshake and sticks to something, and is a big flag that says, this is no good, this shouldn't be here, somebody come and deal with this. You'll have B cells that will come and say, okay, this specific antibody works. I need to make more and more and more of these to go out and find other antigens that are this exact type. And then your white blood cells will see, oh, this has an antibody stuck to it. That means I need to destroy it. And so our white blood cells shouldn't destroy anything unless it has that antibody. But that antibody, acting as a big flag saying, I'm bad, I shouldn't be here, tells the white blood cell what it should eat. Now this actually, when we talk about what it can bind to, Last time we talked about a virus, when it hijacks a cell, it's making more viruses inside the cell, but the cell's not dead yet, and it hasn't been allowed to explode with more viruses yet. When that happens, that frequently changes the shape of the cell, or it changes the nature of the cell. And our antibodies can actually find that as well, can find a misshapen cell and signal again to our white blood cells, this cell isn't right, this cell shouldn't be here, and this cell needs to be dealt with. So these white blood cells can then attack our own cells if our antibodies have flagged that cell as a problem. It's also that same reason is a way that our own immune system can actually fight off cancer sometimes, because our antibodies can see this cell isn't shaped the way it's supposed to be. Something's not right with the proteins on the outside of it. Something's not right with the secret handshake. Come and deal with this. So our immune system, our white blood cells, this can work on our own cells. And then additionally, I wanted to note, when we talk about deactivating antigens, we talked about, the virus has the secret handshake that it wants to get into the cell with. And if the antibody comes along and binds to the virus, it binds to those same proteins that the virus wants to use to get into the cell. So if an antibody has stuck itself to a virus, even if the virus hasn't been destroyed, the virus can't actually do what it wants to do. It can't get into our cells because the antibody is gumming up the works. Because the antibody has grabbed that handshake and will not let go, the virus can't do a handshake with another cell. I know I'm really working this handshake analogy, but I hope that that's coming across and that's working, because that's kind of it's the easiest way to talk about the way this protein works. So that's how our antibodies are doing it. And then really, when we talk about those B cells, we say that, that B cell sees, okay, this antibody shape works. I need to make more of them right now. Well, those B cells don't go away. Those B cells learn and stick around. And so when you first get infected, we're looking at this chart here about how your immune system learns. When we first get infected, it usually takes about 7 days for our immune system, for our adaptive immune system, to really figure out what's going on and get all of the antibody production up and going and get rid of that infection. And then the number of antibodies is going to go back down. But if our body ever sees the same thing, if that antibody shape ever gets triggered a second time, all of those B cells, which have now become memory B cells, still exist and can produce much, much more, much, much quicker. So here, if we see on a first infection, it takes about 7 days to get to peak antibody production. The second time we see the same thing, it takes about 3 days. It's less than half the time, and this chart is accurate in the sense that the second time we produce much, much more antibody than the first time. We're capable of fighting something off much better after repeat exposure. So our immune system learns. Again, it's just, you can talk for days about the immune system. It is an incredible thing inside our body that you have no control over, that is able to destroy cells, is free moving, and learns. It gets smarter. And this chart is also exactly why vaccines save lives and why vaccines work and why we use them. Because if we can get this first time, where you have a slow response done because of a vaccine showing the body what the right shape is, then the second time you see the same thing, then you actually have this much quicker and much stronger sort of response. So at some point, we will have a COVID-19 vaccine. And then